So BostonMagazine.com, of course, I mean, this is relatively legit source, unlike Folk or, the sham subreddits. This article was posted January 28th, 2014 by Bill Jensen on BostonMagazine.com. Will the internet find Maura Murray? 10 years ago, a 21-year-old UMass student vanished without a trace. For an army of amateur sleuths across the internet, that was just the beginning. On the afternoon of February 9, 2004, a 21-year-old nursing student at UMass Amherst named Maura Murray sent an email to her professors, allegedly. I mean, someone using her email address sent the email. There was a death in the family, she wrote, and she'd be gone for a few days. Then she gathered up her textbooks. She'd always been a good student, scoring 1420 on her SATs, and climbed into her Saturn sedan. Allegedly, again, it might have not even been on campus. A 5'7" brunette, she was a native of Hanson, Massachusetts, and had spent 3 months as a cadet at West Point before transferring to UMass. She packed toiletries, a week's worth of clothes, exercise gear. She ran track and cross country, a stuffed animal given to her by her dad, and a necklace from her boyfriend whom she'd met at West Point and was now stationed in Oklahoma. Murray planned to spend the following summer with him, and she may have already known that he intended to propose. There were other items in the car, many of which would be obsessed over for the next decade. Some alcohol, a MapQuest printout of directions to Burlington, Vermont, and a book titled Not Without Peril, 150 Years of Misadventure on the Presidential Range of New Hampshire, which tells the tales of more than a dozen hiker tragedies in the White Mountains. Maura's parents separated when she was 6, and though she lived with her mother, her father would often take her hiking in those mountains. By all accounts, she loved going up there. By 7 p.m., it was dark, and Maura was zipping, or allegedly, Maura's Saturn anyway, was zipping along on a black stretch of Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. She took a shaky turn and crashed into a snowbank, again, allegedly. Not long after, a passing motorist pulled up to the disabled car and asked Maura, or the driver if it wasn't Maura, if she needed help. She declined. Mere minutes later, a police officer arrived at the scene and found the car locked, its windshield cracked, the airbags deployed, and not a soul in sight. In just those moments, Maura Murray had disappeared into the New England night. This month marks the 10th anniversary of Maura's disappearance. At the time, the case was a national sensation. I mean, not quite. Investigators began looking for her with search dogs combing the area in a half-mile radius around the accident and helicopters deployed overhead. The media flocked to the scene, first the local TV stations and then the press up from Boston and then the national media horde. Montel Williams and Greta Van Susteren covered the story, and on February 17th, 8 days after the disappearance, CNN's Soledad O'Brien interviewed Maura's father, Fred Murray, and her boyfriend, Bill Rauch, who flew in from Oklahoma. Rauch told O'Brien that while traveling, he received a voice message. Quote, I could hear only breathing, and then towards the end of the voicemail, I heard what was apparent to be crying and then a whimper, which I'm certain was Maura. End quote. Let me repeat that last part. Billy Rauch stated, I'm certain was Maura. The number was from a prepaid calling card. 2 weeks later, as leads remained elusive, the Globe asked, where could Maura be? Ominously, the paper noted, the more details are revealed, the more baffling the case becomes, police acknowledge. Wow, at least that much is true. I mean, very rarely is something true in any of these articles. By the end of fall 2004, the TV crews and newspapers were gradually fading away. Still, Fred Murray would travel to the area every weekend, pressing authorities for more answers than they could provide. Maura's family and friends felt like they were in the mountains alone, but they were about to get a lot more company than they ever bargained for. Maura had gone missing, just as the social web was being born, and there was a small chorus beginning to get louder in an unexpected place. Internet message boards. Although I do have to chime in here. I mean, I mentioned this on some of the other podcasts. BBS message boards and such were, I don't want to say they were popular, but they existed. I mean, in the late 80s, I mean, people were talking on them. So it's not like they didn't exist at all, but obviously the popularity was coming up more so in the early 2000s, a lot more so. For Maura Murray, the weekend prior to her disappearance had been a whirlwind. She was in the middle of her nursing program as well as going on the clinical rotations that were part of her junior year curriculum. She also worked as a security guard at an art gallery and in the dorms. It's interesting, though, that this article, a lot of times the art gallery isn't even mentioned. Here, not only is it mentioned, it supersedes her dorm security desk job here. Interesting. At around 10:20 p.m. on a Thursday before she disappeared, she received a phone call, and later in her shift that night, she became so upset that her supervisor escorted her back to her dorm room. Again, this is all alleged. The police report of Karen Mayotte, of course, has not been released under lock and key, like some kind of Area 51 document or something. That weekend, her father came up from his job in Connecticut to help Maura find a new car. Maura's 96 Saturn kind of blew a cylinder and was smoking something fierce, according to Fred Murray. I said, "You can't drive this car. The cops will pull you over in a heartbeat," he recalls. As a temporary fix, Fred says he suggested she put a rag inside the tailpipe to hide the smoke. He says he withdrew $4,000 over the course of 8 ATM transactions, and that on that Saturday he took Maura to purchase a car in Northampton. They ended up a couple $1,000s short, though, so Fred figured he'd go home, round up some more money, and come back another time. Father and daughter drove back to campus and went to dinner at a brew pub in Amherst with one of Maura's friends. Later, Maura dropped off Fred at his hotel and drove his new Toyota Corolla to an on-campus party where she drank with friends. Now, hold on. Let me come back to that because I believe we did go over this article in the early episodes, but if not, it does have some interesting information here. He's stating you can't drive this car, and of course, apparently Fred Murray admitted in an interview later that he actually took Maura off the insurance of that vehicle. So she would probably never drive that vehicle unless there was some kind of an emergency, but again, we cannot verify that the Saturn was even on campus because UMass, for whatever reason, will not release any CCTV footage from the parking lots or common areas which existed at the time. Again, any other missing persons case, you'd have a bunch of that footage. But this case, for whatever reason, everything has to be hidden and under lock and key. I've mentioned this in other episodes. If this was some kind of botched witness protection program operation, would there just simply be a shutdown and stand down of all other agencies just to keep it all under wraps? I mean, does that seem counterintuitive, though? Or just do they think it would be that much easier? Because if they did a legitimate, real investigation, perhaps it would lead to the truth, and they can't have that. So is that why there's just this mass stand down and just absolute shutdown and blackout of any and all information, security footage, police reports from like days prior? I mean, what does that have to do with her going missing on the Monday? According to Fred, nothing that happened before matters, and yet Karen Mayotte's police report can never see the light of day. Really weird. But apparently, has this been verified by police that which exact dealership were they in at Northampton? So is that the one where Bill Rausch had luck, where he got his sob? And we went over Bill's sob story in previous podcasts. He seemed to have gotten extremely triggered over that on Twitter as well. So who knows what the deal is there, but it would be curious to know whether the police actually went to the dealership. And you would think that a car dealership would have security footage as well, so that could be verified. But even if they didn't, just driving by gas stations or other areas, it seemed like they could verify at least whether or not they were in the area of the dealership, and then speak to the people at the dealership that could verify whether or not Fred Murray and Maura Murray ever went in, and whether they even discussed purchasing a car, and whether they were short the money. Now, even if they were short the money, Fred Murray doesn't have credit cards, so he's got $4,000 in cash. He can't put a little bit on the credit card? I mean, that's kind of weird. I mean, it's just weird. Does that story match? And that's without getting into all the oddities that we went over before. Okay, continuing on here. Maura left the party at 2:30 a.m. and headed back to Fred's hotel. At 3:30 a.m. while driving, and keep in mind the campus is only minutes away, so she's leaving the party at 2:30 a.m. and it's only a few minutes to that intersection. But apparently, it takes all the way until 3:30 a.m. I mean, there's a missing hour on both that day and, well, there could be missing multiple hours. Who knows when she really went missing? Could have been Sunday. But anyway, at 3:30 a.m., while driving through Hadley, she crashed into a guardrail. The police showed up, but no charges were filed. And by all accounts, Maura, though visibly shaken, was not given a breathalyzer test. Close to $10,000 worth of damage was done to the car. Over the next couple days, as she and her father tried to figure out the car's insurance situation, Maura started to make travel plans. Just before 1 p.m. on Monday, she called the owner of a condo rental in Bartlett, or someone using her phone, rather. In Bartlett, New Hampshire, she also, or someone using her phone, dialed 1-800-GO-STOW, but did not make a reservation at one of the hotels in the area. That same day, she sent an email to her boyfriend, or again, someone using her account. Quote, I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I don't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promise to call today, though. Love you, Maura. End quote. Hours later, she left him a voicemail promising to talk, and she sent emails to her professors and supervisors informing them falsely of a death in her family. You know what's weird, though? And people who knew Maura can comment on this. If she's planning to call him shortly, would she send an email? Because now everybody's emails on their smartphone, so you can get a notification as soon as you get an email, so it's almost the same as texting. Whereas back then, you'd have to actually specifically log in on a computer. I mean, I suppose some of the phones might have started to get email. I actually don't know. This is 2004. At which point could you easily access email on your phone? But again, with the data charges and everything, it'd probably be easier just to access it on your computer. In which case, how often would somebody be going to check their computer? I mean, even Bill Roushey's in the military. He's got all these things to do. Would she send him an email at all if she was planning to call him that particular day? I promised to call today. So within hours, she's going to call. So why would she even bother sending that email? Wouldn't it seem more likely if she did call, then left a message, he still didn't get it, maybe send a follow-up email with more information? Again, I'm not claiming any of this is true or untrue. I never really thought about that aspect before, but if you're planning to call someone shortly, would you send them an email? Particularly back in early 2004. Okay, continuing on here. When she left her dorm room, did she hint at what lay ahead? Some reports claim she had packed her belongings and taken art off her walls. Evidence, perhaps, that she was leaving for good. Her father says the floors had been cleaned over Christmas break, which explains why some of her things were still in boxes. But almost everyone agrees that Maura was planning to leave campus for at least a few nights. Almost everyone? Who is this almost everyone? She withdrew $280 from an ATM, almost all of the money in her account, and purchased, according to police, Bailey's, Kahlua, vodka, and box wine from a nearby liquor store. Of course, that video has never been released. Under lock and key. She checked her voicemail at 4:37 p.m., her last known call, or again, someone using her phone. She told no one where she was going, if she was going anywhere at all. On the internet, Maura's disappearance is the perfect obsession. A puzzle of clues that offers a tantalizing illusion. If the right armchair detective connects the right dots, maybe the unsolvable can be solved. And so every day the case attracts new recruits, analyzing and dissecting, and reconstructing the details of her story with a Warren Commission-like fervor. And is that not warranted? How legitimate was the Warren Commission? As legitimate as the official information put out in the Maura Murray case? The late-night car accident after the party, the father visiting with $4,000 cash in his pocket, the crying episode, the box of wine, the MapQuest printout, the rag in the tailpipe, and the MapQuest printout, who knows, did that have a date on it? Because if that did have a date on it and it was that date, then okay, fine. Otherwise, how do they know? If it was an old MapQuest printout, I mean, what does that prove? Online sleuthing stepped into the spotlight this past April when the FBI asked for the public's help in identifying the Boston Marathon bombers. The agency, though, was drawing on a long tradition of crowdsourcing investigations, one that stretches from Wild West wanted posters to TV's America's Most Wanted. But it was also tapping into the more recent tradition of independent, online, open-sourced sleuthing. Citizen detectives, often strangers living miles or continents apart, sharing info and working in unison. The practice can lead to stunning revelations, as when crime blogger Alexandria Goddard uncovered details of a high school rape case in Steubenville, Ohio, by screen-grabbing the tweets of partygoers. And famously, it can lead to false accusations. Some Reddit users helped identify the brand of hats worn by one of the marathon bombers, but others falsely implicated numerous innocent standers-by. Now, at least online, it often seems that there is no such thing as a cold case. But when Maura Murray disappeared, the social web was in its infancy. There was no YouTube and no Twitter. On the day Maura went missing, Facebook was 5 days old. There was MySpace, though. And so you can read the history of her case as a parable about the evolution of online sleuthing. In the months after Maura vanished, one of Rausch's friends launched a site in an attempt to publicize the case. Long gone sites like alt.true-crime and crimenews2000.com began reposting newspaper articles as well as the standard details. In November 2004, 9 months after she vanished, a second cousin of Maura's started the website MauraMurray.com. A Maura Murray string was even created on justiceforchandra.com, a site set up to discuss the case of Washington, D.C. intern Chandra Levy, who had gone missing 3 years earlier. That's actually been a requested case on MINDSHOCK. Again, I will be doing an episode on that. Supposedly there are some parallels, including why there's such silence from official sources in the Maura Murray case. In February 2005, members of the DIY detective message board websleuths.com jumped into the fray. Anonymous posters with names like Grassy Knoll 2 and Cyber Law attempted to piece together a timeline, considering why Maura would have partied on Saturday night or what made her so upset at work. Cyber Law. That sounds like some 80s post-apocalyptic movie. In 2007, pages on Facebook and MySpace were created in hopes of gathering tips, and in the Franconia City Forum on the small town message board topics.com, more than 42,000 comments have been posted on a Murray thread in just the past 4 years. Just as with anywhere else on the internet, the discussion can run from constructive to abusive. Debates range from the backgrounds of the neighbors along Route 112 to whether Maura was trying to use the rag in the tailpipe to burn her car. Wow. So the forums are awash with theories. Some believe she was taken by a serial killer monitoring the police scanner. Others think she faked the incident and bolted for Canada. The most obsessive even making pilgrimages to the curve on Route 112, snapping photos, taking measurements, attempting to reconstruct the accident. I'm just going to chime in here as well because notice in most these official sources, if there is some kind of concerted conspiracy, nobody wants to mention that Maura might have not even left the UMass area. Notice all of the steers, the obfuscators, the so-called personalities in the case, they'll debate a million different things, but nobody wants to touch that. Nobody wants to touch the fact that Maura might not have been in New Hampshire, and the Saturn itself might have not even been on campus. And you have to notice, again, going back to conspiracies over the decades, it seems like the guilty parties are always content to have multiple competing theories, as long as none of them touch certain things that would unravel the actual case. Is this one of them? Again, I am not alleging anything is true or untrue. This is MINDSHOCK, where the motto is. The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. That includes the identity of the driver. Continuing on here, within the past year, a few users have broken off from the free-for-alls of the message boards and launched standalone sites with the sole focus on finding Maura. One of them, called Not Without Peril, was created by Joseph Anderson, 30, an attorney, which is laughable, from Whitman, Massachusetts, who came across Maura's case in early 2013 while researching another missing person. He became fascinated and began commenting on sites under the pseudonym Sam Ledyard. Well, actually, you know what? I don't know if we actually went over this Boston Mag article. Because, yeah, that is curious. He became in the summer of 2013, he launched his own site with a few other regular commenters, naming it after the title of the book that was found in Maura's car. In just a few months, it racked up more than 22,000 comments, Anderson says. The contributors to the site have come to know one another and have taken on roles. For instance, one is known for his connections on other Maura Murray sites. Another is a real estate agent adept at pulling useful info from the MLS database. Anderson spends hours per day on Maura's case. Wow, obsessed much? When he gets home from work, he usually hops on the computer and starts digging. It could go on from 7 till midnight, he says. So Boston Mag actually interviewed him, or at least got his comments here, his statements. What does everybody think of this? Because, and again, not to make parallels to the Illuminati, to the Matrix, but you have, again, Erin Larkin, self-proclaimed guerrilla ontologist. She could have picked any moniker, but she chose guerrilla ontologist. If you haven't checked out the MINDSHOCK episode in the Maura Murray series on Aaron Larkin, and guerrilla ontology itself, taken from the Illuminatus conspiracy book trilogy, based in Discordianism, where guerrilla ontology is a term supposedly coined by one of the authors, where the whole purpose is to kind of confuse people, to aim at, one of the quotes from that term was, how much of this is real and how much of it is a put on. Intentional obfuscation. And that's the moniker Aaron Larkin chose. And then we also have this guy, Mr. Anderson, from The Matrix. Now, Anderson's kind of a popular last name, so again, I'm not saying that that's not a coincidence, but when you have a Tower of Babel stack of coincidences like you do in the Maura Murray case, all of it, the synchronicity involved here is just off the wall. From Mr. Anderson to guerrilla ontology. Continuing the article here, Butch Atwood was driving his school bus back to his home just after 7 p.m. when he spotted a black Saturn stopped in the eastbound lane of Route 112 but facing west. He later told police that he pulled up beside the wreck and asked a woman fitting Maura's description if he should call for help. Now, I don't know. He stated that the driver did not look like the pictures he was shown, so how does that fit Maura's description? Also, again, keep in mind, police transcript stated that Butch Atwood said that he hit a pine tree. He. Now, again, this is 2022, so it could be confusing. But back in 2004, he meant male, a man. Just like when Faith Westman said that there was a man smoking a cigarette. So these are all references to a male, not a female, that the coincidence theorists, the narrative steers, and the obfuscators, they want to pretend and hallucinate that this is not in the transcript and should never be addressed. The woman told him no, and that she had already called AAA. That seemed strange to him since cell phone reception in the area was weak to non-existent. When he reached his house, it was within view of the accident scene. He called police right away. In a house steps away from the Saturn, resident Faith Westman had also called the police. She said she saw what looked like a man smoking a cigarette in the car. Oh, interesting. So the article did mention that. Her husband later said it could have been a woman on a cell phone. Now, again, supposedly the timeline there is after Fred Murray had spoken to them. He told them that it was Maura, so then they assumed it could have been a woman on a cell phone. So this kind of gaslighting or remanufacturing of the narrative, that only occurred later. So their most fresh, most recent account, while on the phone with law enforcement, was that it was a man smoking a cigarette. And of course, a man and a woman could move slightly differently. So your subconscious, again, could pick up on those differences, even if just from a figure in the darkness, you might not be able to tell per se, but the movement could give it away. And again, this is not Maura Murray in high school where she had maybe a very lean figure. She had a very womanly figure in college, so I don't know how many people would mistake Maura Murray for a man just in general. Where again, if this was somebody else or somebody with a different figure, you could make that argument. Another neighbor said that from her kitchen window, she saw the car stopped with lights flashing and someone walking around the vehicle. The first police officer arrived at 7:46 p.m., allegedly. He found a car but no woman. Inside the Saturn, police later detected the smell of alcohol and found stains on the driver's side door and the ceiling that looked like red wine. Red liquid was found on the ground, as well as an empty soda bottle which smelled of booze. It was obvious that she had been drinking, said Jeff Strelzin, chief of the homicide unit at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office and the lead prosecutor in the investigation. How was it obvious that she would be drinking if there's no definitive evidence she was ever even at the scene or even left the UMass area? Curious question. There was no sign of a struggle or foul play. Police found no footprints heading off the road into the woods. As the days stretched on, Fred Murray came to feel that the police were botching the search. He was upset that the Haverhill, New Hampshire police hadn't immediately alerted other departments along Route 112 of Maura's disappearance. Particularly, if she never left the UMass area, no search is going to find her in the Haverhill, New Hampshire area. They hadn't interviewed all the residents with an eye shot of the scene, and they waited so long to talk to the last people Maura was known to have spoken to, including the owner of the rental condo. Interesting phrasing here, known to have spoke to. How do they know that Maura was the one using her own phone? He was even more upset when the Haverhill PD issued a press release 2 days after Maura's disappearance claiming she was possibly suicidal. Fred, his ex-wife Lori, and Bill Rausch's mother Sharon all became increasingly and very publicly critical of the official investigation. Lori died of cancer in 2009. Fred claims the police gave their search dogs a new pair of gloves found in the backseat of the car, but never worn as a scent for Maura, instead of something that would have been more identifiable, like her running shoes. He also alleges that on the night of the accident, the police failed to search the direction Maura was headed. I knew she was headed east, Fred says. She was headed to Bartlett. She was up there as an infant. I remember changing her diapers in a tent up there, for Christ's sakes. It's freezing cold out, there's a crack in the windshield, there's a potential head injury, there's arguably evidence of drinking which could promote hypothermia. A young person in a state of shock, you have danger, and you don't go down the street the way she was going? I mean, if she was even up there. She was harmed at UMass and this was all staged. I mean, who knows? Even after a decade, Fred wants more answers about what the police were doing or not doing in the 2 days after Maura's disappearance. This year, he's renewing his call for the FBI to investigate the officers who conducted the original investigation. Wow. So, I actually haven't heard this before. This article stating he wants the FBI to investigate the officers who conducted the original investigation. Fred has been a difficult person to deal with from the beginning, Strelzin said. I understand a lot of where he's coming from, but I feel his anger is misplaced. I mean, Strelzin is talking like, I don't know, like one of these SJWs in 2022. I feel his anger is misplaced. What does Strelzin's feelings have to do with anything? How about using facts, logic, thought processes? I mean, what Strelzin, I mean, of course he would feel that. I mean, what... Wow, I mean, this is bizarre. With no trust in local law enforcement, Fred welcomed volunteer citizens to join in the search. A year into the case, former New Hampshire State Police Lieutenant John Healy met a relative of Maura's named Helena Murray at a conference on missing persons. Having a college-age daughter himself and knowing he had the tools to help, Healy organized a group of experienced private eyes and began to make trips to Route 112, even bringing cadaver dogs to the scene. Fred Murray initially worked closely with Healy's group. In 2005, though, he sued the state police in an attempt to make public all the reports pertaining to the investigation. He was unsuccessful, and what's more, Healy and his volunteers publicly disagreed with his effort. And again, that's because they had ties to law enforcement, so of course they would disagree with that. Fred says more conflicts arose, so he stopped working with them. He shut the door on me and the whole group of volunteers ever since, Healy says. Healy's group is still trying to find Maura, and by his estimates, he has spent thousands of hours following leads. We're doing this for their whole family, Healy says. So why did they quit now? But anyway, I just wanted to bring this up as well. If Fred had won the lawsuit and all documents and evidence was made public, would the case be solved today? Because we know law enforcement were too incompetent to solve it. So either by design or not, either way. Sometimes, even after all these years, someone thinks they've found a new clue. On November 1st, a man calling himself Tom Davies logged into Anderson's site and asked, what color was Maura's backpack? Black was the reply. Why do you ask? I ask because about a year after Maura disappeared, I found a black backpack in the woods behind the bathrooms at Pemigewasset Overlook. Davies went on to say that after he found the backpack, he informed a state trooper but had heard nothing since. Could the backpack still be up there? Being a father with several daughters, Davies wrote, I've been haunted by Maura's disappearance. A week later, a commenter named N.H. Ryder asked, was the area not far from the road? I am going to take a ride up there and look. An hour and a half later, N.H. Ryder posted again, holy crap, I almost crapped my pants. Tom is legit, I just got back from the Pemi Overlook and I found the black backpack. N.H. Ryder said he contacted the authorities and gave them directions to find the backpack, which was around 30 miles from where Maura was last seen. I mean, that's not where she was alleged to have been last seen. He said he didn't have a camera with him, or from the so-called accident scene, from the staged accident scene, 30 miles. He said he didn't have a camera with him, so he didn't take any photos, but reported that the bag was empty and frozen solid. He claimed that when he went back to the scene the following day, the backpack was gone, presumably taken by the cold case unit. All Strelzin will say is that we are aware of the backpack. It's impossible to know whether it was a real clue, a red herring, or part of some loony internet game no different from a bizarre YouTube video featuring a bespectacled man cackling into the camera that surfaced in 2012 on the 8th anniversary of Maura's disappearance, but proved to just be a disturbing false lead. Or simply a taunt at James Renner from Alden Olson. Strelzin knows firsthand how citizen sleuths can solve a mystery. In 2003, he worked the case of a Concord, New Hampshire man who kidnapped and killed his 2 children. Once apprehended, the man refused to divulge the location of the buried bodies and hanged himself in his jail cell. After his death, private citizens formed search groups and traveled to the area authorities believed the children were buried. I would communicate with some of those groups, share info, send pictures back and forth, Strelzin says. Eventually, one of the searchers found the children's bodies just off the highway in Hudson, Ohio. In Maura's case, Strelzin will not say how often law enforcement monitors online forums, but concedes that the police are aware of things that are said. He adds that nothing fruitful has ever come from the DIY detectives. All we ask is that they do not interfere in the investigation, Strelzin continues. You would expect that if people had info, they would contact the authorities, unless the authorities, of course, complicit or corrupt, in which case, why would they contact them? From the sprawling online world of the Maura Murray mystery, filled with anonymous commenters, trolls, and theorists, a freelance journalist using his real name has emerged, determined to crack the case. In the summer of 2010, James Renner, a former reporter for a weekly newspaper called The Cleveland Scene, saw an episode of 2020 on Maura. I just thought, wow, I wonder if I could figure it out, Renner says. He began posting on message boards and launched his own blog, My Search for Maura Murray, in June 2011. Wow, it's been that long. That's crazy. Eventually, he had so much info up on the site, from minuscule facts to big theories, that he decided to begin working on a manuscript. Renner has just completed a 300-page book about his search for Maura and can rattle off minute details about the case as if they were baseball stats. During his investigation, Renner wrote on his site that he had discovered that just 3 months before her disappearance, Maura was visited by police officers at her dorm on account of $79.02 she had spent on pizza deliveries with a stolen credit card number, allegedly. He also wrote that records indicate that the charges would be dropped within 3 months under one condition: Maura would have to stay out of trouble until then. Could her late-night car accident after drinking at a party have brought those charges back into play? Renner believes that Maura ran away and that she may still be alive. This past December, he traveled through Quebec, following up on a lead he read in a message board in 2009 about Maura being in Sherbrooke, a town near the New Hampshire border. He posted flyers with Maura's photo along the way, and while he says he got some tantalizing leads, none panned out. Tantalizing. How often is that word utilized? Sherbrooke joined places like Montreal, Toronto, Hillsborough, New Hampshire, and Barton, Vermont on the long list of spots where Maura had supposedly been spotted but never found. Renner also questions whether Fred may be standing in the way of finding his daughter. On his blog, Renner has speculated the father knows more than he's letting on, and he theorizes that Fred may know why Maura went to New Hampshire, even if he may not know where she is now. Whether he helped her out, I do not know, Renner says. After hearing about numerous accusatory posts on Renner's blog, Fred refused to cooperate for the book. He believes his daughter was abducted by a local dirtbag and rejects the notion that she was running away. She didn't have any reason, Fred says. She had things going for her. She was going to be a nurse. She was getting a new car, a 3-year-old car, the very next Saturday. She was getting married soon. She was getting great marks. So if this is true, apparently they picked out the exact car. It was a 3-year-old car. And they were planning to buy it the following Saturday. Here's the thing, though. If the Patrick Vassy hit and run is in play, and then Maura, with possibly Fred's help and or knowledge, they were just trying to dump the Saturn somewhere. Again, not necessarily Maura herself. Someone else was going to dump the Saturn. And she was going to get a new car just to keep the Patrick Vassy hit and run under wraps. Again, not that Maura was the one who hit him, but if someone borrowed Maura's vehicle, she just didn't want to be involved. And again, that Monday morning, coincidentally, was when it was announced on campus that Patrick Vassy was in a coma, and supposedly he was not expected to make it. So he did survive, but and then again made that really cryptic statement that it's far-fetched that Maura or Maura's Saturn was involved. How would he know? He got hit and was in a coma. I mean, how would he know what is or isn't far-fetched? I mean, why would he even be commenting on that? It's really weird. But anyway, Continuing on here, the feud between Renner and Murray has become personal. What I think he's trying to do is create characters for a screenplay, Fred says of Renner. I have spent countless hours, every possible trail. You won't believe the places I've been. For his part, Renner finds Murray's behavior suspicious. In the history of missing women, what father has ever not wanted more publicity about their missing daughter, Renner says. Fred says he's waiting to see the book before he responds to it. From what I hear, there's a lot of false insinuations. Renner says that he would welcome a lawsuit from Fred Murray. There's nothing that would please me more than to depose Fred in court under oath, Renner says. Everything in the book is factual and backed up with documentation. And you know what? Renner has been vindicated at every turn. Again, not that what he said he was true, but that he was being honest about what people told him. And he simply reported it. He wants me to be a subplot because I don't like to talk to him, Fred counters. I can take temporary hits. They're losing battles, but there's a war. For Helena Murray, the downsides of citizen sleuthing have come to outweigh the benefits. It's terribly, terribly sad to see what they do to Fred online, she says. Helena even took down the message board on her site, MauraMurrayMissing.com, when visitors' attacks became too sharp. I really don't give an expletive about that crap, Fred says. That's a sideshow. The deal is, where's my daughter? And you know what else is weird? I mean, has Fred or Julie they've never considered that Maura Murray was harmed at UMass. It's kind of weird how it's like the one thing nobody wants to touch is whether or not Maura was the driver and whether or not she ever left the UMass area. Because why has no one, wouldn't that be something to verify? How many cases where someone who's harmed, again, if it's a female, usually by their significant other or someone known to them, friend, acquaintance, whoever, male or female, not a stranger, dumping the vehicle, that's the MO. Look at all these cases. Someone goes missing, either they're found murdered or not. The vehicle was clearly dumped and staged. That's the go-to. And yet in the Maura Murray case, there's so many Dunning-Kruger goofs running around who don't even look at that avenue, which is curious in and of itself. Not only that, but look how triggered people become when you even suggest something that's quite standard in any missing woman's case.